All right, people of faith, let's take another walk. Let's talk on the subject of the spirit of the Antichrist. The spirit of the Antichrist. Now, we know in the last days, which we are aware of, that, well, at least we have heard that we are in those last days. And it talks about it in several books of the Bible about in the last days, there's going to be many antichrists walking around, and there's going to be the spirit of the Antichrist. Now, the spirit of the Antichrist is basically it's the oneness of the flesh. It's the consciousness of the flesh. Now, let's go back to the garden. When God gave the command to Adam not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil, was that about the tree or was that about the obedience? Like, who is he going to listen to? Who is he not going to listen to? Now, up until that point, Satan or the serpent has never appeared unto Adam and Eve. Never appeared. Never appeared unto them up until the point of the command. When God gave Adam the command, don't eat of the tree, you can eat of every tree except for the tree that's in the midst of the garden. Don't eat of that tree. All of a sudden, the serpent wants to talk about this very specific tree. Where is he at before all of when God said name the animals? Where is he at then? Where is he at when God said, I give you dominion? Now, Satan came after the point where things were decreed. If you notice, Adam named all the animals, then God gave him a dominion, authority, and everything else, and all this and so forth. Now Satan comes in and wants to tempt Adam. Now, what he wants to tempt Adam is to get Adam to cross the obedience line. In other words, it's either you listening to God or the Holy Spirit or holiness. How about that? Let's say it that way. Either you listening to holiness. In other words, either you listen to holiness or you listen to unholiness, right? So holiness would be everything that's, of course, we know about. That's the Holy Spirit. But what is the Holy Spirit? Everything that embraces, everything that exalts love itself. So in other words, within love, everything is full, everything is whole, everything is perfect. So to walk in the flesh is to walk in disholiness or unholiness, or you're walking in a way that you're fulfilling a separation from being whole. See, that's why it's a double-edged sword. So this is why God has no interest with the flesh. When Satan or the serpent presented himself unto Eve, then Eve took it and gave it to Adam. Whatever the case may be, it came at the extent of what God said. Now, God gave it to Adam. God gave the command to Adam, don't eat of the tree. Now, if Adam were to eat of the tree, he is what? Disobeying God. In other words, if there's only one voice in the garden, then God just gave a command. There's no other alternative. There's no other suggestion. So where's the other suggestion? The other suggestion came through Eve. When Eve did it, when Eve listened to the serpent, the other suggestion came as one. So they both know it. Regardless if Adam was there or not, they was inseparable. They were one. They were one. What one knew, the other one knew. They were one. We don't understand that because we are divided. We know division. That's why we are citizens, or we are our devotion is towards feeding the flesh, which makes us an enmity, enmity, to God. So in other words, we are an enemy to God because we're not in oneness with him. Now that separation goes back as far as Adam. Now Jesus came to do what? To eliminate the separation. Jesus became the bridge. If we were to accept Jesus and allow our spirit to be one with Jesus and our spirit to follow Jesus, we're no longer separated from the Father. So whatever the Father is, we become. We don't try to be. We don't learn to be. We don't ask to be. We just be. It's like we go to sleep and we wake up and we're like him. Literally. You literally go to sleep and all of a sudden your mind is open to new things. New things that the earth has never known before. Why? Because you and the Father are one, based upon you receiving his Son. So when we get oneness with Jesus, we are separated from the oneness of the obedience of the flesh. And we become an obedience to the Spirit. Now, the Spirit of God goes through the Spirit of His Son. See how that works? So, I want to talk about something very specifically. We were talking about just not too long ago. We were talking about wholeness. Now, the wholeness is it's a big deal in the spirit. It's not a big deal of the flesh. In the spirit, in the flesh, you could be broken all day. That's why we accept it. That's why we live in it. We thrive in it. We build our kingdoms in it. We build our standards and statures inside the flesh level. The flesh level is this. You don't have to be whole. You don't have to be complete. You don't have to have wholeness. How about that? So that's why you don't have to be holy. When you submit and obey the flesh, you are separated from being a complete circle. That means your ending meets to your beginning meets your ending. You are complete. There's nothing to there's no crack in it. There is no split. There's nothing to separate it when you are whole, right? But you only can be whole in the Spirit of God. Can't be whole in the flesh. The flesh actually is against being whole. Look at the reason. Look at the ways that we become gods on the earth. Give me one thing that we become a god in on the earth that is whole. I'll wait, because you can't be whole without love. Because love is the only presence that is whole. Love gives out, but it always returns, because it returns back to itself. What am I saying here? Let's say, for example, the LGBT type situation. Why is it not holy? Because it's broken. How can it be fulfilled in love? How? No, they love each other. No, they don't love each other. That's one, if not two, components fulfilling their flesh. The flesh can't be whole because it's broken by itself. The flesh itself, the reason why the flesh is broken, because it doesn't want to surrender to the authority of love. So that makes it incomplete. That's why the things that involve the flesh are incomplete particles. It's not nothing whole. So if you have someone that's LGBT and want to get married, it's like to have the ceremony. Why? What's the purpose of the marriage ceremony in the first place? The marriage ceremony is for the people to witness it, right? But the actual marriage is the bond to become one. How can a man and a man become one? They can't. They're going to be broken. They can try to do what the man and the woman is going to do, or to become whole. They could try to do that. But why do they have to bring in artificial supplements to create that? They can't birth a child, so they got to go adopt, and they got to do all the different things. They can't do it. They are restricted from life. That goes with that's the gays, and then you get the same thing with the lesbians. You go the same thing with the bisexuals. The same thing with the transgender. You're being something that you wasn't made to be. So what is compelling you to be that? Brokenness. The brokenness could have came from, you may not have done anything to be broken. You could inherit a broken spirit. What is a broken spirit? An unloved spirit. Now, were your parents loved their parents, and were their parents loved their parents? How far can you go back to know? All the enemy needs, all the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist needs, is a moment of brokenness. And he would take that brokenness and he would capitalize off of it. But how does he capitalize? He makes you into a god, into the flesh nature. So the brokenness never gets restored. He show you how to build a bridge or build a throne on top of it. How to get it your way on top of it. And he grants you this scepter to make everybody do it your way. If you don't do it your way, it becomes a problem to you. Why? Because you have embraced fear. Fear is now your crown. And the scepter that you hold in your hand is death itself. So the scepter is the commands from you, or the voice from you, or the words from you, or whatever that you project out of your mouth becomes death. So whatever that it goes, it contaminates. It crumbles and dies because it has no love in it. If it had love in it, you wouldn't have that scepter in your hand, and that crown of fear wouldn't be allowed on your head. You wouldn't be walking in ways to fulfill the flesh of brokenness. So this is a continuation from the last two, from the series that we're starting, Identity. This could be part 3. We could tie that into that. But we're talking about the spirit of the Antichrist. The spirit of the Antichrist is actually the spirit of the flesh. Now go back to the garden. When Adam and Eve were in the garden, they were equals. Somebody said, give you proof. When you go back to the Genesis 1:26, when God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and he's talking about man as in mankind. If you notice, he goes on to say, he created he, them, male and female, he created he, them. Mankind is not male. Mankind is a unison between the two. It's male and female, female and male. There's no need to say if the male is more dominant than the female, because they were one. If the male can look at the female as an equal, who is above another? Nobody. Who's the head? Nobody's the head. They're both the head because they both are in unison. So if God is saying something to Adam, he's saying it to Eve because they are in unison. What separated Adam and Eve? The disobedience. The moment that they both disobeyed God, she took of it, he took of it. The both they decide to listen to another voice, they became separated from one another. If you notice, they started to blame shift. Well, she gave it to me, and then she said the serpent gave it to me, so they started to blame shift, right? All because of they chose not to listen to God. That's what we do. When God tells us not to do something, and he comes to ask us, like, why did you do it? And how does he ask us that when it falls apart? Whenever what we did that God tells us not to do something, it falls apart, has him asking the question, why are you here? How did you get to this place to be in this position where something falls apart? And they say, well, because this, if I knew better, I did better. No. Did I give you the command to be here? Did my love place you here? Or did another one lead you to this place to be disappointed? God comes with no disappointment. I cannot emphasize that enough. God does not come with disappointment. He is whole. If you were to draw a circle on a piece of paper, you have a starting point, and that starting point, you have an ending point, and that ending point meets the starting point and vice versa. That's a complete circle. Within that complete circle, there's no way for anything to get in, and there's nothing that's in can get out. So you are whole. Everything that's in the contents of that circle is all that you need. So when God forms this circle of life around you, there's only but the voice on the outside that's trying to get you to draw something from the outside in. That's why everything is an inside job. Because once the outside suggestion comes in, is inside of you, now you take that suggestion and you erupt like a volcano. But that eruption or that outside suggestion is there to what? Give you wisdom to the flesh. Now here come the segregations and here come the divisions. Because it shows you how to what? To put stipulations and parameters for certain things to be obtained. If you're whole, where's your parameter? You only got one parameter. Don't listen to an outside voice. When you're a whole, that means you are inside of God, right? So there's only one voice that can talk to you. When you're outside the circle, many voices can talk to you. But there's so many, you can't even recognize there's only one. That's why we get bombarded with so many thoughts in our head, and we get what? disoriented and we get lost, we get confused, and we wonder what's going on. What should we do? How to be. And, I need a break. I need to get away. All right, everybody back off. You get frustrated because you got so many thoughts of the flesh inside your mind that was never designed to be there. You was made to be whole. In other words, not to be broken, not to be within question to detail, not to be separated, not to be in lack. You wasn't made that way. When God created you, he created you in his image. God is whole. Love is a complete circle. There's nothing that's inside, and there's nothing on the outside can get in. That's why if you're either inside God's circle of trust or you're not. So what will be on the outskirts of God's circle of trust? Division itself. And who is division? Lucifer. Lucifer, or Satan, because I say not Lucifer. Satan, when Lucifer became Satan, he became the great division. That's why it's considered death. That's why it's considered fear. Because it's the opposite of fear and death is the opposite of being whole. This is why God commands us to be holy. He's not saying be holy to be above. He's saying be holy because he is holy. In other words, be as I am. Be like your father. If I'm your father, be like me. Be whole. There is nothing missing a part of God. God is not missing one thing. That's the reason why a person can't say he has a mother or a father. You only need a mother and a father when you are missing something. Now I said we have a mother and a father. We don't have a mother and a father. A believer doesn't. Let me say it that way. A believer in Christ doesn't have a mother and a father. God becomes their mother and their father because he's the only one that's complete. A mother and a father is not complete because they are descendants from their mother and a father. They're only complete when they come back home to Christ. And God, that's God's love in a package deal inside of Christ. Until they can accept what's inside Christ, they can't accept the Father. How can you see how can you see God being incomplete? He is holy. He is without, how can you grasp him? How can you comprehend him if you're missing something in your life? He doesn't make any sense because what? Brokenness. Lack, void, being deprived, these things. How can you know him without, as long as you are as long as you are cultivated inside of incompletion, how can you know him? He doesn't make any sense. So that's why we can understand why you would throw away Jesus. Because Jesus, he's God in a bottle. Just like Jesus is the Ten Commandments in a bottle. They are easy to pop the cork and drink. Easy. If I take the commandments, or if I take Jesus, I can understand the commandments. If I take Jesus, I can understand the Father. But if I try to understand the commandments without Jesus, or if I try to understand the commandments without God, how can God give me the understanding unless the understanding is permitted to come inside of us? That's why it was considered the walk of faith first, before they enter into the land of rest, which is the Holy Spirit, before they enter grace, they walked the walk of faith. They had to walk away from what? Their flesh. Why they had to walk away from their flesh? Because in fact, there was a voice over their flesh. That voice was automatic division. That's the self-same voice that told Adam and Eve, or Adam first, you could disobey God. That's division already. If that serpent was with God, why is it questioning God? Why is it presenting them or presenting her a question to oppose God? That's the serpent. That's Satan. He's the great division. That goes back to the book of Isaiah. When he set up in his heart that he wanted to be like the Most High God, you are divided from him. When Lucifer was created, he was created for a certain positioning. And within that positioning, he had all that he would ever need to fulfill that position. It's the same thing when God called you before the foundation of God made you before the foundation of the world. And when he called you, in other words, you're awakening from being in a bubble of doing it the way that following the flesh, and then you awaken to doing the things that follow the spirit. Within that knowledge of being awakened from the dead, as the Bible would say, you will have everything inside of you to fulfill your assignment. because it was in you before the foundation of the world. You have finally got to the place to walk away from your flesh, to walk in the spirit, to finally walk in that original assignment that God made you to be before the foundation of the world. Until then, you will follow the ways of the flesh to the pit of hell. And from the pit of hell, you go to the sea of death, right? So, all right, we're talking about now, if we were to tap into a little bit further about the whole holiness. Now, the marriage thing is a bond, all right, between a man and a woman, all right? That's the marriage. When a man enters into the woman by her consent, and also ultimately by the vow to God, they do it. They're both doing it and to the declare of His direction, of His perfect will for their lives. So when a man enters to the woman, they are married. They are one. What's in him is in her. What's in her is in him. They both are sanctified through the covenant of them coming together in a unison of God. Why? So when they come together, they will bond, or they will form a circle of trust. A circle of trust is based upon love. They are inside that circle of trust. The moment that they come together, they would have formed a body. I mean, they would have formed a bond, right? And in that bond, it will be off a circle of love, right? It will be a circle of trust, which is love is the middle of it. Now, anything that's not inside that circle of trust or the circle of love didn't come through that marriage of those two come together as one. Anything that didn't bring those two together to come together as one in love, not in the flesh, not in lust, not in greed, not in imagery or imagination or some form of outside thinking, but only through the image of love. In other words, they would have been sent by God, by His Spirit, to not endorse the marriage, to do their part to allow them to come together as one. Anything that's not bringing them together as one in the harmony of love, or in harmony, or in the unison, or in the obedience to love, is there to bring forth what? Division. That will be what we would call flesh-oriented. Anything that's flesh-oriented is listening to a spirit. It's called the Antichrist spirit. In other words, is anti-love. So if you deny Jesus, you basically deny God's. You basically don't want nothing to do with God's love. People say, well, no, Jesus is a man and I don't believe in man. No. If you want to stay there, you stay there. We talk about to the individual that can see past flesh and blood and its limitations. They can see past the carnal mind. To be spiritually minded is to be past the carnal mind. In other words, the carnal mind is full of brokenness. It's full of incompletion. It's partially, granted access to see certain things. You can't see everything in its entirety, so it will always be without. The only way you can see everything in its entirety is through the eye lens of God, which is through His Spirit. So is it clear to say that if you are broken, that you're not whole? If you got anything missing in your life, I'm not talking about anything naturally. I'm talking about anything missing in your spiritual life. It's clear to say that you got something missing there. If you're missing hope, if you're missing love, if you're missing joy, if you're missing peace, if you're missing kindness, if you're missing gentleness, if you're missing meekness, temperance, if you're missing honesty, if you're missing what else we can use? Purity. If you're missing these things, it's clear to say. Is it clear to say that you are considered broken? You are without. That's what broken means, to be without. You're not whole. So that means you wouldn't be considered holy. WHOLY. We could break that down to being holy. God is holy. That means He is not missing anything. He is in one complete circle of Himself. And everything that comes from Him would be the same, would have to be the same. No, everything that comes from Him is the same, and everything that came from Him has to be the same. Otherwise, they will be separated from Him. Now we can understand how Lucifer fell from the heaven down to the earth. And once he fell to the earth, he became what? Satan, that old serpent. And that serpent was on a mission, based upon what's inside of him. What's inside of him, he's separated from heaven. So therefore, you're going to bring forth separation wherever you go. If he was in a unison of God, why did he come to Eve with a question? Does God not know that you become a God in your own eyes, know both good and evil? Why would he do that? If he was in unison with God, he would bring us towards the Father, not bring a separation from the Father. This is the start of the Antichrist spirit. Now, once Jesus came to the earth, that's basically the Heavenly Father in a body, right? That's the Word, that's the Spirit, all in one, right? Now, how can you, okay, and that's God and what's the name? So the division or the separation from God would be the Antichrist spirit. So whatever that Jesus was commanding us how to be and how to live, how to listen, how to be in the Spirit, or how to walk in the Spirit, is this Spirit telling us how to walk away from that. Don't do it this way. You don't have you. If you're a man, you could be with another man. If you're a man, you can change your gender. If you're this, but you can't physically do that without a suggestion of thought. The suggestion of thought is to show you how to appease what you feel. How you feel makes you into a God in your own eyes. But in that God of your own eyes, you're never complete. You're never whole. You can do everything you want to try to make yourself to look as though that you are, but you're incomplete because the completion starts with you obeying to the perfect will for your life. You cannot tell me that incompletion is part of perfection. You can't tell me that. So this is why people, generation after generation, can go along with poverty because they haven't been able to get to the root of why they're in poverty. You're not in poverty because of your ethnic group. You're not in poverty because simply how tall you are or your stature, of your physical stature. You're not in poverty because how your parents were. You're in poverty because the spirit of poverty or a impoverished spirit is still remaining inside your soul. What is that to say? That means something inside your soul is missing love. That could be in an area of your mind. It could be an area of your will. It could be an area of your emotion. It could be an area of your intellect. It could be an area of your imagination. It's deprived of love. So if you're deprived of love in any component of your soul, your spirit is dead because the source or the nutrients that your soul gets comes from your spirit. So your spirit has to been separated from love itself. That separation goes all the way up. That separation gives suggestions how to go past being restored back with love to give you a way to go around being loved. In other words, it builds you a throne on top of this being separated from love. So now you become anti-love. Now you can understand why it's considered antichrist. Jesus is God himself, but God himself is love itself. So love came in flesh. But you can't receive it in the natural. You have to receive it in the spirit. Why? Because you are a spirit. And the thing that you're lacking, or the thing that an individual may be lacking in his life, is never natural. You're not lacking a house. You're not lacking food. You're not lacking clothes. You're not lacking these things. You want those things because of the impact of the image that it portrays. It portrays that if you have this, you have that. If you have this, you have that. If you have this, you have that. If you can go up and down the street, go in your neighborhood, whatever, always get fed, and you always get fed, and you make sure you eat, and you have a place to lay your head, would you complain? No, because you don't got to worry about what bills, you don't got to worry about how you're going to eat, you don't got to worry about how you lay your head. The only time that it becomes a big deal is when a person wants to go above that. That means the suggestion of thought is trying to amplify the gravity of becoming a God. So now here comes the whole disparity, whole separation, the division, where if this house is bigger than this house means this, and that house means that. So this is where all that brokenness is. It's broken through the Antichrist spirit. The Antichrist spirit is a voice that's against the spirit of Christ. It's a voice that brings forth division to separate from that individual soul to connect or having its reconnection to the Heavenly Father. Now we can tie that all the way back to the garden. Now in the garden, the serpent or Satan himself was on a mission. He picked the serpent because it was more subtle, it was more cunning, it was more crafty. In other words, it had a way about itself to defy its orders. It will go up against certain things. It would manipulate. It will connive. It would do what it can to get its leverage. Right. So he chose that. If that's the case, then that serpent or Satan himself would not have brought a division between God and His creation. He would have ushered in, if he was with God or if he was with love, to say that way, so we can make that understood. If he was with love, he would have brought them towards love. Instead, he led them to put a frown or have them to frown upon love. Does God not know? This is what he said. Does God not know that you become a God in your own eyes, knowing both good and evil? In other words, how does that bring you closer to God? That's bringing a question to saying like God is keeping something from you. Division. That serpent was more subtle. In other words, the serpent has a way. It had a way to persuade you away from something that is another word that you're connected to. So, like if your mind was on the clouds, but if you see a snake coming, the way it's moving and everything else, you immediately, it would take you away. It's like a song, for example. If your mind was on thinking on something that was a peaceful, and you hear a certain beat, boom, doom, doom, it can take you away from being a mind of peace and all of a sudden being a mind of the opposite direction. That you want to think about how to be destructive instead of being constructive. So we're talking about the Antichrist spirit is very subtle. And any person that's willing to allow it, they may not even know that they even have it because it's just that subtle. It's just that cunning. It's just that crafty. It's just that manipulative. It can get its way inside of you without being detected. The only way you can detect it is by the Spirit of God. That's the only way a person will ever know if they are of the flesh, if they're of the Spirit or not, is by the presence of God. But you can't be in the presence of God until you are holy. In other words, until you are whole. Somebody give you proof about somebody in the Bible. All right, let's go about Moses. All right, when Moses saw the burning bush, is it clear to say that when Moses saw the burning bush, he was not in oneness with God? It was not. That burning bush was there to draw him closer to God. So as it's like you're looking at a burning bush, but it's not burning to a crisp. It is on fire. You can't help but to be curious about that because everything you know has a starting point and an ending point. And once you see a bush that's burning, or see something that's burning, it normally goes down to nothing. This is not going down to nothing. It just staying afloat. So now you are immediately outside of your mind. You're not crazy. You're just outside of your mind. In other words, the mind that you have known that everything had a starting point has an ending point. You're outside of that. So now he's on the outside of that. And now all of a sudden, looking at this, being on the outside of that, what's on the outside is able to talk to him while he's on the outside of himself. So it said, take off your shoes, Moses. You are on holy ground. All right, the ground is holy. It's without separation. It's perfect. Everything that the shoes, everything about you is imperfected. Is imperfected. So he does what it was suggested, take off his shoes, and I walk towards it. Now here come the instructions and so forth. But the point of me saying it is that God is holy. Everything that we have mustered by the measure of our thinking without him is not holy. It's there to fulfill what? The flesh. The shoes was there to satisfy the feet. All right? Because they was walking barefooted for so long, and then that's wear and tear, and then they found something another way, another thought came about to put something to make it a little more comforting towards their feet. But the shoes are unholy. They're broken. They're missing something. They didn't come from whatever God makes is holy. that information, okay, for me to walk, for Moses to walk with shoes on, is him being in tune with his flesh. You see how that goes. So when God is telling Moses, take off your shoes, you are on holy ground, that means you finna be separated from everything that separates you from me. And anything that is separated from me is not allowed here. It's holy. So if it didn't come from me, it's not of me. Whatever God make is good. When God made the flesh, when God made the man, the body, he sculpted the body out of the dirt. It was made good. Only when the incorruption of the outside suggestion came in and contaminated and told it was not good. So what is Jesus trying to do? He's trying to ultimately get us back to the Father, but how can he get us to the, if the Father if God is a spirit, the Father is a spirit, and all we know is the teachings, all we know is the instruction, all we know of the lifestyle of listen to the flesh. That if our feet hurt, we go get something to make it comforting. All we know is how to be in tune with how we feel and how we think or how we smell or how we touch. And that's all we have known. The Father has to be able to reach past, get us to see past that to be able to see him. Otherwise, if we were to come to him with that, we are considered unholy. Now imagine this. You're full with so much possibilities that you can get hurt, harmed, or endangered. And you're about to embrace an entity that has no recollection of that. How do you think that's going to happen? That's like, for example, a fire going towards something that is flammable. How do you think this is going to happen? It's going to catch, right? But if a fire was to go against something that is unflammable, what will happen? It will bounce off each other, right? That's how it is with us. So if we're not holy and we try to go for God, we will bounce off of him. We won't catch him. We won't become one with him. We will bounce off to him. So God is saying, God will talk to Moses and say, look, here's some orders. If you can follow these orders, you are becoming one with me. How am I becoming one with you? Because you listen to what I'm asking you to do. We're one now. So he took off his shoes. Now they're on one accord. Now he can be on what? Holy ground. He took off the naturalism of another voice. The other voice told him to make shoes or put on shoes and everything else, all that. God's like, all right, you could be done with the flesh. You could be done with the cares of the flesh here on holy ground. None of that is necessary. How to eat, what to wear, none of that is considered a necessity when you are a spirit. The problem with us is that we don't want to become a spirit because we don't want to become something more. What I mean by that is they let you know how miserable we are. We complain about the misery, but we don't want to do nothing about it. That's like if you was in a neighborhood and you're out and about and you see a lot of paper on the ground. And instead of you addressing the matter and resolving the matter, you continue the problem of the matter. So you make a complaint. You say, well, all this paper around here. But here's another suggestion. Why don't you pick up the paper? Well, I didn't put it down there, so why complain about it? That's how miserable you is. Or that's not how miserable you is. That's how misery is. And that's how miserable the individual soul becomes. They can't go further because they haven't resolved where they at. They're not allowed to see past themselves. So until we can see past the flesh nature, until we can see that the flesh nature is the flesh nature, how can you go past it to see something more? You have to be born again to see that the flesh nature is the flesh nature. You will have to be separated from the spirit in one sense to even sense the fact that there's a separation between the flesh and the spirit. So in other words, you have to be separated on one level. And in that separation of that one level, it will show you that there's a distinct difference between the two entities, the flesh consciousness and the spirit consciousness. There's two different natures. When Adam was made, He was not fleshly conscious. He was not separated from God conscious. He wasn't full of the Antichrist conscious. The Antichrist spirit came through Adam, right? Did it not? Where did it come from? People say, like, well, no, the Antichrist came after Jesus. Well, it came after Jesus, but where did it start? It started from the death suit. The moment that Adam disobeyed God, he became death itself. He became a child of death, not death like he's the origin of death, like he created death. He is a descendant of death. So he's anti-God. He's anti-Christ. So Jesus came to do what? Destroy all the works of Satan. So everything that was considered anti-death, Jesus came to bring what? Abundance of life. So this is why a person that doesn't want to be whole can't receive Jesus. This is why a person that doesn't want to be whole, don't want to be holy, can't be in the presence of God. So that's why we would need Jesus to become holy. And to become holy, we could stand before God, where the Father could talk to us spirit to spirit, where he could look at us and see ourselves. We could be in what? In a covenant relationship. Now, if we're looking in the book of Revelations, it talks about that, how he is married to his bride. His bride is though who is holy. He says, be ye holy, for I am holy. In other words, the Father is without imperfection. The Father is whole. So in other words, the Father's not missing anything. If I'm concerned about how I'm going to pay a bill, I'm missing something. It's not money that I'm missing. Fear is robbing me. I'm missing my relationship, my connection with my Father. My Father is whole. He don't have a care, a worry, or concern about anything. And he created everything. Now, if anyone that would have the utmost entitlement to be concerned with something should be him. Because if he miss a beat, it's off. That's how much faith he is. He is assured that whatever that he does is good. It's done. It's like he's so confident, not overly confident to be arrogant or anything else other than that. He just, whatever he does is perfect. When he says it's good, it is good. When he made mankind, it was good. Something of the opposite nature has to come inside of mankind to have them to question if they're good or not, or have them to think that they're not. That's why a person that's in poverty is not based upon outside of the outskirts of outside. It's not based upon what so and so have and they're not allowing you to have. The reason why you don't have it because you don't believe that you have it. And that's, as long as you don't believe that you have it, you can constantly be a person that you could be stolen from. And that's why the Antichrist steals from you. So a impoverished individual is a person who doesn't know who they are. But how can you know who you are when you're broken? Who you going to turn to? Everybody around you is broken. Nobody is whole. Nobody's complete. Nobody's walking without lack around them until they see somebody walking around them without lack. And they start to ask all these penetrating questions. But these penetrating questions is based upon how to not be in the spirit, but how to understand the spirit. So in other words, they have their foot in the spirit, or they want to tap into the water, but they don't want to fully go into the water. So how can they actually, this is what they would call a rattle in the fence, so being lukewarm. They want to stay in the middle because they're not really sure if they should really indulge into going the direction that you're going without questions, or that's fear itself. The questions is the fear. So they don't want to fully let go of the fear, which is the questioning, to just accept who you are. So the only thing that person can say is like, you knew me before this. That's why Jesus said this. He said, if you don't believe in the things that I say, believe on the things that I do. If you don't believe on the things that I do, believe on the things that I say. They back each other up. So mankind is looking for examples of that. But they find me someone that have separated themselves, not separated themselves, find me someone who has been separated from their flesh. You will see results from another kingdom, and it will stand apart. Now, what the enemy would try to do to that individual, try to convince them that they're on an island of their own, that no one loves them, no one wants to be around them, that it tries to create a corruption or create the avenue of isolation within the individual. So what the point of that suggestion is to get them to question their isolation. Like they are actually being like in a, I don't want to say a cocoon, where the Father is actually birthing something inside of them. In other words, he's giving them the rebirth. He's actually going inside their spirit and allowing their spirit to be born again because they are separated from the world. They're separated from the world. So he's uploading information to them at the same time extracting or downloading information from them. As they increase in God, they increase in the knowledge of Him, whatever else, and they become this entirely different creation. This is what Jesus had to go through. He had to separate from the nature of His flesh. Even though He never sinned to be connected to it, He inherited based upon He was born into a fleshly skin. I mean, His spirit was inside of a fleshly skin. So His skin, His fleshly nature is already absorbed into a separation of God. So that's why He had to deny. That's why when we listen, Satan is tempting Him. He's tempting Him of things that pertain towards His flesh, not anything pertaining towards His spirit. He wants him to listen to the flesh or listen to the suggestion of the flesh to render his spirit unto him, because the spirit is the most high. You see how that's working? So that's the same thing what he does with us. He wants us to render ourselves to the flesh nature, the suggestions of the flesh. So like if you ask God to deliver you from something, and He did. So the temptation, the enticement, the approach is the seducing spirits is there to seduce you to get back into the flow of the nature of the flesh. Or in other words, the voice of the flesh. Remember, that voice of the flesh is separation, is division. And wherever you go, you can't help but to bring forth destruction, because you are separation. You can't help but to bring forth division. That's where you get a person that don't have anything good to say, because they are separated from God Himself. They have this, they are in tune with the flesh. And as long as that voice is their overseer and the voice that they listen to, as long as that voice sits in a director's chair inside their soul, they're going to pledge their allegiance towards it. That's why they will always be about them. They can't help but to be about them. They can go to church, they can read the Bible, but until God comes inside of them and they become a new creation, which means it comes at the extent. Have you ever seen a person that's on drugs or something like that have to go through the rehabilitation and the construct to separate from their addiction? They really go through. It's really a split. That it's like a literally they are separating from this spiritual force. It's a process. So that's the same thing with us. We immediately think I confess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Okay, when you confess them, you just put yourself in a doorway to walk this out of the separation from the flesh. You didn't. Your confession gave you access to go through the procedure. You granted the procedure. I confess Jesus Christ as Lord. No, okay, or are you confessing Him as Lord? It's done in the spirit in terms of what Jesus did. By you confessing that Jesus Christ is Lord, you're accepting what Jesus did. However, you as a soul have to make the choice of to walk away from the flesh. Your mind, your will, your emotion, your intellect, your imagination has to be turned into something totally new. It has to become a new creation. It has to be renewed. And the renewance is in the construct of something that's holy. Before, it was up under contamination, where somebody could say, what do you mean by contamination, or how was it unholy? Well, can any corrupt communication come inside of you? In other words, can you be around corrupt communication? Can you be around those that basically wants to be glorified? Can you be around those that wants to actually, they don't care about being honest? Can you be around those that practice doing outside what the commandments told them not to do? Can you be around that? Yeah. Well, then therefore you're broken. You're unholy. So until that is solidified, that you're willing to separate from that tier, you're not Jesus won't mean anything, and you can't get the Father unless you go through the Son. Why? Because if you try to go to the Father of being unholy, how can you comprehend holiness? You're gonna try to grasp it with the carnal mind, with the mind that's subject to fear and death. How can you grasp it? That's why Moses was puzzled at this burning bush. He was puzzled. Like, how is this bush burning but not being consumed? See, that's all what? That's fear based. That's all fear. And so therefore he has to be stripped from that before he can perform what he's meant to do. He can't be a part of another nature and do greatness. In other words, that's like a person, you can't be something or you can't be somewhere that you're not. You cannot be somewhere that you're not. You have to be it to be there. So there's a person like, well, I keep being around the wrong atmosphere and everything else. You can't go nowhere that you're not. And you go ahead and say the Holy Spirit sent you. But then if the Holy Spirit sent you, then therefore how can you complain? Because you have what's necessary for that situation, for that environment. You're on assignment. And once you drop it, you're not there to stay, you're there to go. So if it's not that, then why are you there? What's inside of you is one and the same with that environment. So if anybody said, for example, if you're struggling with something, so like if you see the life for you is not to have a care of this world, like not to worry about what you're going to eat, what to worry about what to wear, how you're going to live, or how you're going to live. If that's unhandled, and if that's where you are, you want to see God in that aspect, well, then therefore you're going to have to be separated from something on your flesh that's actually coming up against that. There's something inside of you that's telling you that that's not possible. And the only way that can be made possible is to go in this way. Now you understand like the punishment of Adam. Adam, you're going to till the ground all the days of your life. You're going to work it. It didn't tell him that until you become a new creation. Adam itself had to become something new. This is where we get Jesus. This is why Jesus considered what? The second Adam. Jesus came to the world and birth gave us a new spirit of life. So if we accept in Jesus, we're actually no longer in the understanding of the first Adam anymore. If we're no longer in the conception of the first Adam anymore, we become what? Something entirely different. So, in other words, when Adam disobeyed God, he has an authority over him that always have a way for him to be. And that way for him to be is to be without. In other words, to make him work all the days of his life. Toiling, turmoils, whatever. This is where you get those that preach the prosperity message. They're saying like, come to Christ, come to Jesus. Because inside Jesus, you get the love package. You get everything. You get the benefits. You get everything in it. But you have to, he has to become one with your spirit first. But within that, you will be, when that transformation happens, you immediately will be separated from your old nature. And you can't go back to your old nature. Otherwise, if you go back to your old nature, you're going back to the punishment that came with the first Adam. Now, the scripture says, the life that reigns in Christ is far superior or far greater than the death that reigns in Adam. So in other words, the life of rest, the life of peace, or being free from worrying about how to eat, what to wear, whatever, that's done away now. You don't have to worry about that when you're inside of Jesus, or when Jesus comes inside of you. When two spirits, or your spirit is connected to that spirit, you can see the immediate difference of where you once was into where you are now. Instantly, right there. It's like Moses standing in front of a burning bush, and you're seeing this bush consume. No, forgive me. You're seeing this bush burn, but not consume. And in the midst of being puzzled, he's seeing something he can't believe. That's the two different realities. The two different realities is that he's seeing something he's not supposed to be able to believe to see. Two different realities. He's seeing something that's happening, which makes it reality, but he's also leaving that reality or coming above a different reality of seeing something that he's not supposed to see. He's seeing a bush burn without being consumed. That's like you seeing something happen to you that you can't believe that it's supposed to happen to you. And then the only thing that's happening is that you're confronting a reality that never was supposed to be a part of you in the first place. Miracles is not to miracles is not to embrace you in the spirit. It's actually to separate you from the flesh. So when so-called a miracle is done, that's actually the mind, that's actually the soul being fulfilled in its wholeness. If something is taken from you, you are without it. The miracle is not the justification of the matter. It doesn't justify the situation. The problem is the fact is, why are you without it? And a person can say, well, God don't want me to have it. Well, then that's a lie. Because God is whole. And if you are his, why would he want you without it? That means at some point, there's two things going to happen. Either you wasn't his by you walking away, or that you never known to be his, and he's bringing you back home to become his so you can be with. This is why you can't be in the flesh and be in the spirit. They're going to constantly fight each other. Being with Jesus, you get it all, of course. But that comes at the expense or at the extent of walking away from the flesh and all its endeavors and all its entitlements and all its craftiness and all its attachments and everything else. You can't do that by yourself. A person can't get off drugs by themselves. Once that spirit is inside of them, a person can't get rid of being, and let's go back to here. Go back to here for a second about the LGBT type deal. Why is this such a deal? Because it's not holy. It's not through the pleasing of man holiness. It's the pleasing of God holiness. Let's say pleasing of love. How about that? LGBT does not please love. It's not. It's actually against love. No, we're doing this in the name of love because we love ourselves. If you are a lover of yourself, why are you changing yourself? Or why are you walking away from completing yourself? If you are a male, you have a genital, correct? And that genital was made for one purpose only, to come into one situation to make it whole. Now, if you go into a situation that's the one and the same as you, how can that make it whole? It's not. There's two negatives. It just doesn't work. I'm not talking about magnetic negatives and all that good stuff. It's magnets work together and positive work together. But I'm saying it's two negatives. It doesn't fulfill anything. They're stuck right there. They only stuck with how they feel. And for most, that's enough. But in that enough is nothing but misery because you can't see any further. You can't go any further. You can only see another person have, and so you try to emulate what they have versus become something new. In other words, it wasn't when God created us, there was something inside of us that he created that the world has never known before. That's why everybody looks like robots, because nobody wants to be born again. Nobody wants to become separated from what they know. For the most cases, throughout the ignorance, they don't know that there's a difference because they don't see a difference. Who's walking around them? Who's walking among them? That's separated from the consciousness of their flesh, from the understanding, from the knowledge of their flesh. Oh, that understanding and knowledge of their flesh is just like everybody else. So until you see somebody that's walking among you, that's separated from walking among you, you don't know that there's a difference. Because why? Because you're stuck in the natural realm. You're stuck in the physical realm. You only can see what you see. So if you see a person that you have known like a great deal of your life, and they all of a sudden they're different. They're not trying to be, they're just different. They get your attention in a certain way that you will become curious, such as like that burning bush did with Moses. It's different. They have, I'm sure they have burnt logs and everything else for heat and so forth and other things, so they know how to accumulate a fire. So he's familiar with the fire. Or if not, that's a bush there, and he have seen a bush before. Let's say, for example, if Moses never seen a fire before, and he's seen a bush before, he have never seen a fire. He never seen that inside of a bush before. So anywhere it go, he's becoming something different. but he's becoming something different because he's seeing past himself physically. So until you can see something that's different among you, how can you see something better for yourself? So this is what misery traps the individual, and it makes them somehow it makes it very comfortable for them to stay there, and it will build a throne in that misery, and they will give them the scepter. They have a crown on their head, which is fear based. It will make them afraid to see past what they see and know, and then in their hand they will have a scepter, and it will be a scepter of death. So whatever that they command out of them will be death oriented. So whatever that they speak, so that they got the blessing, whatever they speak is going to contaminate that blessing. Let's say they prayed to God, for example. God, I ask you for a car. Okay, the car comes. But death is going to come out of them because they're in tune with their flesh. Until that need, or until the flesh is no longer the Lord of their life, or the overlord, or their director of their life, of how they do things. Until they don't go by how they feel, it is the captain of their ship. So that death is going to come out of them. The flesh feelings is an enmity to God. God does not go by how he feels. What I mean by that is, like, for God to go by how God goes by who he is. We're not who we feel to be. If we go by how we feel to be, that's the nature, or that's the voice of the flesh. So, like, for example, if you got something on the floor that needs to be picked up, and you can say, I don't feel like doing it. So who are you listening to? You listen to something that's suggesting you to pick it up, then also something that's suggesting that you don't have to. When the one that's suggesting you to pick it up is there to what? Give you humility, right? It couldn't be evil, because in fact what you're picking up is actually making the situation better. So it couldn't be evil, right? So if you were to say, like, well, if the voice says don't pick it up, and you were to listen to that, that can't help but to be evil, because it doesn't clean up the area. That, in other words, that area could eventually prevent you. That area could somehow cause you to trip and fall, or stumble, or something like that. It could be, you could be in a position to be hurt, harm, and damage from it, no matter how minute or how small it may be. It can get you to be in a position to be hurt, harm, or danger. But at the same time, it's evil, because in fact it embraces you. It endorses you to be a god in your own eyes. You know what's best for you. Knowing what's best for you goes by how you feel. I feel sick. That's you saying you knowing what's best for you. If you had another alternative to go by, let's say, for example, before you felt that you didn't feel good, how did you feel? I felt great. So how come you're not going by that now? Something came in to rob you of that. And normally it came through you with the death scepter. You decreed a thing, and now it's coming. What you decreed is coming upon you. When you're born again, you're inside the circle of trust of God. You're inside of him. When you're not born again, you're of a different circle. You're of a circle of trust to be against God. In other words, your allegiance is pled to the flesh. And that flesh is an entrapment. It's a miserable pit. You can't see past what you see. You're stuck. You can't imagine anything better for you. You're stuck. So the only way you can get it is through the windows, or through the airway, or the gateway of appeasing the flesh. And the flesh is not going to do things that's in order. It's going to do things out of order. It doesn't like restriction. The flesh doesn't like, for example, it doesn't like ramifications. It doesn't like to be restricted. It's a god in his own eyes, and it's trying to endorse you to be a god in your own eyes, if you agree with it. Somebody said, how does this come about? When the serpent spoke to them, their eyes became open. When they disobeyed God and they ate of the tree, their eyes became open because that tree was there to make one wise. And it made them wise in their own eyes. This is without God's consent. Now, beforehand, when God was speaking to them, God would speak to them and have them something to do with something to say, so forth. So they was going by what? One voice. That was God. Up to this point, there's another voice talking to them. And that other voice said, hey, it came upon them for them to be a God now. Now they can hear a voice that's not God. And that's the voice that we hear that gets us in trouble all the time. That's the self-same voice that says that piece of paper just landed on the ground. Oh, that whatever is landing on the ground, it said don't pick it up. I don't got to pick it up then. So you don't. And then the next opportunity to throw something else on the ground and it's there, and you like, well, you pick it up. Like, no, I ain't got to pick it up because you listen to that spirit the first time. You're not going to disobey it the second time. You're familiar with it now. Y'all are one of the same. Once you obey it, y'all are one of the same. Once Adam disobeyed God, he's no longer one of the same with God, but he's also, let's say this way, he became one of the same with that voice that told him to disobey God. They're one of the same. So that voice that's one of the same has told him what? You're naked. It gives him a totally different perspective of himself. It creates a totally different environment, a totally different atmosphere, a reality, a world that he have never known. That's why he died. He died because he was separated from God. Jesus is what? The bridge. The bridge is back to the fellowship of God. But you can't go to the Father unless you go through the Son. Why? Because Jesus is God in a bottle. And if we can't accept Jesus in the spirit form, how can we leave the consciousness of the flesh? How can we leave the consciousness of the flesh without becoming born again of the spirit? You can't. So this is a lot of people think they can try to go to their God, but look at you. You're still unconscious with your flesh. They could try to fast and everything else. They're going to give you a temporary separation. Yeah, from what? Things of the flesh. To be what? A spirit. But Jesus, if you come to Jesus, you strip them all of it. All you got to do is walk as he walked. Allow him to be your Lord. If Jesus said, stay away from corrupt communication, stay away from corrupt communication. That will be doing what? That will be walking with wholeness, that I don't have to do no work. Jesus will do all the work for me. And at the same time, that will separate me from the flesh, then now I could become one with the Father. So whatever that the Father sees, I can see. So say like, for example, when a pandemic happened, God can be able to talk to you and tell you what to do before it actually happens. So versus being away from him, when the storm hits, you don't know what to do. So you're going to go by what? The wisdom of the world. But the wisdom of the world is following fear. It's following a corrupt system. The system that is following is not complete. That's why it's a practice. They're trying to perfect it, but it's not. It can't be perfected because it's denying perfection. The system was made to be above the next. So as long as there's no harmony in it, how is it surrendering to love? People that's helping people that's helping people are getting paid for it. And that them getting paid for it is accumulating a fantasy. That's not reality. It's not a completion. It will never grant them what they're truly missing. That what they're missing is the reason why they got the job in the first place. Is the very cause of what, just said the way. What they're missing is the very cause of the reason why they went for the job in the first place. They said, like, if I got this job, I can have a better life. I can get out of a better neighborhood, or I can get a better home, get better things to make me look better, right? But the work needs to be done on the inside of them. This is why the people that you'll find that have these positions, they are under so much stress of themselves. You got the money and everything, why are you stressed? Because money is not love. Money is not the answer to all things. Or money is the answer to all things, but it's not the answer to the incompletion. You're not a thing. You're a person. You're a being. You're an existence. You're not a thing. Money can purchase all things, but it's not the answer to everything. What I mean by that is that within you, you are God. You're a spirit. You're an entity. You're a power. You're a presence. Money can't fill that void. You can only dress up the things on the outside for so far, but the inward man is still going to be deprived. That's how a person. How can you get a person that has all the money go bankrupt because they're trying to fulfill something on the inside by the outside, but the outside commands is coming from something that's designed to fall apart. They will decree a thing that's of death, and therefore everything that they put their money towards, it looks like a good idea, like it's a good investment, and then it falls apart because they got death inside of them, which is the very reason why they have what they have in the first place. You take a person who is without the money and who is away from their flesh, you find them to have great provision because they don't have to live by the orders of the flesh. Their overlord is peace now. It becomes joy. They don't work for money, they work for liberation. So any person that has a high positioning job, yeah, they can get all the bells and whistles, they can go take all the trips around the world and do all the different things, so forth, da da da. They can do all that, right? But how come they not enjoy? Somebody could say, oh, how come they're not in love? If they was in love, why are they charging people to give them help? Close out with this. Take the woman with the issue of blood for 12 years. Now, according to her testimony, she went from doctor to doctor, losing all that she had. In other words, spending all the money that she had, and her symptoms did not get better. They grew worse. But then all of a sudden, there's commotion going on or whatever. Now it's like equivalent to us being up under the coronavirus or the COVID-19. You would be quarantined away from civilization, right? You'd be stripped away from all civilization. Why? Because you don't want to infect anybody. So that was her condition. Her condition was not controllable. So therefore, she was kind of like separated from civilization. So she would have to break that barrier. She would have to break the laws, which is one barrier. Then she had to break the flesh barrier to believe that something spiritually can heal her in a way that she can recover to be made whole. So she's pressing through all that, but before she does that, here comes this suggestion: touch the hem, go to Jesus. And then within that, she hears go to Jesus. Within that suggestion, she hears, if I touch him, I could be made whole. That's the whole point of God. God gives us a seed. He don't give us the whole layout. That seed was made to grow. What's the significance of that seed growing? As we grow with that seed, or as that seed grow within us, we are growing with the Father. The relationship is expanding. So if God was to give you everything that you was made to do right now, would you be whole? I mean, would you be fulfilled? No, because you didn't grow. The growth is actually separation from the flesh, and the will to separate, and the desire to separate from the flesh. So she hears this seed, go to Jesus. And within that seed, she hears, by her listening to that, she hears, if you could touch the hem of his garment, you could be made whole. So now she's saying to herself, no one just knows everything. The Spirit of God has to talk to you for you to know. So the Spirit starts with the fact that gave her instruction, go to Jesus. So she went to Jesus. And now on her way to go to Jesus, she's saying to herself, if I touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. Where's that coming from? Because if that was with her all the time, why does she go into all these different doctors? Why did she didn't go to Jesus directly? The Father got her to a place where she finally was humbled enough to seek for a higher result. So now it's time for the Father to be glorified. The Father only can get glorified when we are away from the flesh, not inside the flesh. When he gets us away from the flesh, he is glorified. Why? Because his child is back one with him. His glory is that his children come back to him. His glory is not that because he's God and we glorify him because we say these certain things. He's glorified when his children come back to him. It's like the Big Bang, well, not the Big Bang, but he just burst himself. And all humanity we see walking around the earth is little bits of him. And his desire to see all of him to come back to him. So he can be made whole. He's whole without it because he's the beginning and the ending. That's in his totality. But for us to see that in its totality, we have to understand the fact is that we are part of him that needs to get back to him. See how it works. So she hears this thought, go to Jesus. Even after her money is all gone, she went to doctor and they couldn't do anything for it. It only get mad. It didn't get better. It got worse. But she hears out of the blue, go to Jesus. So what is that? What is that saying? That is saying is right now she's in a fork in the road. She's caught between two roads. So she go by what she knows, which is going to doctor continue to go at that beat, or to go to something that's entirely totally different that she have never known. So she decided to walk by faith, which is to go against something that she's never seen or never known. So she pressed through the crowd, which is against quarantine, which is against the law. And if she got caught, she gets stoned. So she's going through that, but in the midst of doing that, she hears, if I could touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. So then she starts to say, if I could touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. So how can you see better for yourself until you see better for yourself? Otherwise, you'll stay right where you are. There's a reason why you can't progress. There's a reason why you're in a poverty situation, because the spirit of poverty still talks to you. Until another spirit comes in, which will be a spirit of prosperity. Until that spirit comes in, you can't see anything else. So you're only going to say what you see. You see poverty situations. So if the spirit of poverty is in you, therefore you're going to speak nothing but death. You're going to decree a thing. And your declaration is going to be based upon death, which is stemmed from that poverty spirit. So if you got the spirit of prosperity in you, which is the abundance of life, that you can't, your life that you see is hope, is joyful, is peaceful, is loving, is kind. If you could see that, you have abundance of life. That's a prosperous life. So regardless if you got money or not, you always come out on top, because the very core of you can help but to put you in position to reproduce, because it will always lead you where it's at. It won't lead you where it's not. It will lead you where to go, where it's at. So she, hearing this, she pressed to the crowd, and then she touched the hem of his garment, and then instantly she's made whole. But in that connection, there was such power that came from Jesus. Now let's really zoom in on this. She touched him, and she touched the hem of his garment, and she was made whole. Now, there was a transition that happened. Jesus goes on to say after that, who touched me? And his disciples around him say, Master, there's so many people around you that's touching you and everything else. How can you ask, who touched you? In other words, specifically, who touched you? How can you ask that when there's so many is touching you? No. Jesus saying, see, that individual that said that couldn't see where Jesus was at. He could see only in the natural. That's why he saw all the people touching him. He couldn't see someone spiritually took something from him. In other words, she was without spiritually. She had a impoverished spirit inside of her. So therefore, she needed something of what? Prosperity. Something that was without lack. Something that was whole. Something that was holy. Something that was perfect. To render her suffering, because she was unholy. She was without. She was sick. She had an issue of blood for 12 years. So she's broken. So she needs something to be above that to cure her. The doctors can't provide that because they're not separated from the things that's considered that's unholy. They're not separated from that. They are in oneness with that. So Jesus was that. So she touched him, and immediately she was able to withdraw from the spirit of him, which is the life, into her situation, and where she was missing something in her life. It wasn't physical. It was spiritual. She absorbed something from his life from his life to her life, and now she's what made whole. So the fact is, Jesus asked him, who touched me? Who touched me? Someone touched me. There was a power that went through me. Somebody touched me. And around about, he sees a woman over there shivering. She's shaking. Why? Because she became a new creation. What I'm saying is, when Jesus comes inside of you, you will know the difference. You can never be the same again. When he comes inside of you, it's not a feeling that you have known from the flesh. Like when when we do things outside the will of God, so like for example, if we hungry and we wanted we got a taste for something and we eat this burger, whatever that it is for the first time, and it just, oh man, it touched every taste buds. That's as far as we know about feeling. That's as far as we know about feeling. Or we was told that we can never have a new car or something, and we go get a new car, and all of a sudden we're hitting all the components of how we feel, and we just exuberant, but then it dies. It goes away. But we try to keep up that by making the car look shiny. We try to clean it up. We try to keep that self same array, but it dies. But the transformation from going from death, going from flesh to life, or from what that young lady did, to catch her in a ball trembling, she was changed from the inside out. She didn't just get healed from a natural sense. She got healed in her soul. The predominantly of the pain, or the predominantly of the suffering, or the predominantly of anything of lack is inside the mind. At some point in time, we have grown accustomed to actually being without, and we only think the only way to survive that or to tolerate that is to buy something, so that we're going to labor. But you still didn't cure. So help me out with this. You have a person with a problem, and the best suggestion comes to them is to go buy something. Then that doesn't work. They run out of that because they run out of money, so they can't buy. So the next suggestion is, okay, you go get intoxicated. Okay, all right, that doesn't work anymore, because the more you get intoxicated, you got to get higher. You got to get more potent. You got to get more substance to go higher and higher and higher to escape what you're dealing with. Okay, all right. Then at some point you're going to lose money, or you're going to lose the sources of whatever. Your body's going to be depleted, and you won't be able to do it anymore. Well, then what? You're still stuck in that reality that you're still suffering. Then somebody suggests, okay, all right, go get some money. If you get a whole bunch of money, you can buy whatever you want. You can buy whatever you want, but you can't control who loves you. So what good is that if you can buy everything, but nobody loves you? Nobody genuinely loves you. Now you can understand what the problem is. But then you may not even be able to get to that place. But here's another alternative. Go take a trip. Now, help me out with this one. You take a trip to get away from what you're dealing with inside of you, but you don't think that it's inside of you. You think it's around you. See how misery is? It's inside the individual. So until they can see better, they won't be better. So that spirit that's inside them, that's robbing them, is deceiving them. That's where the whole robbery is. It's in the deception that is around you. So you got to get away from your atmosphere. The atmosphere, what I'm speaking about, the spiritual atmosphere that's inside of their soul. They got to get away from that. They got to become something more. So this is going to come at the request of separating from the flesh. So how does this work? You take a trip, and you're as we would say, you're kind of revived. You kind of, all right, whoa. But the moment that you think about, I got to go back home, and you think about, okay, those problems, it's there waiting for you, because the problems is not there waiting for you. They're still inside of you, because they're just waiting for an opportunity to surface. And the moment that you're going back home, because you actually, when you got on a vacation, you put them at a standstill. You said, stop. You will not affect me here. You declared that. Because before you took the trip, you said, well, I could just get on a vacation. So you just declared it that it stopped. And the only time that it can resurface is that the suggestion of thought resurface. And then you start to think about, oh, here we go. And you start thinking about that problem. And all of a sudden, now you know that problem is waiting for you. It's not waiting for you at home. Back when you before you took the vacation, it's inside of you. But a person can't see that because they're still stuck inside, the obedience of the flesh. The flesh will have them to believe that it's around them. But how can you get rid of something that's inside of you without power, or being away from something that's away from you? So now let's fast forward to, I said that was going to be the last one, because this is going to be the last one, I believe. Now let's go to, there was a child that was vexed with a devil, right? And the mother brought the child to Jesus. Brought the child to the disciples, and the disciples couldn't cast out the devil. Even at this time, Jesus gave them the power to cast out devils. but it didn't have the power to cast out the devils. So Jesus, he said, bring the child. The mother said to Jesus, I brought him to your disciples, but they wasn't able to cast him out. And Jesus said, oh, faithless generation. All right. Now, you can even talk to the woman, or you can even talk to the disciples. All right. So let's make it more specific. Jesus said, bring the child to me. And the child, soon the child came to him, or Jesus laid his hand on the child, it was gone, right? Because Jesus has what? Authority over that. Jesus separated from the entity where that spirit or that devil or that unclean spirit is from. Two different natures. That's why when we're inside of Jesus, we have authority. That's why we don't need to worry about what we're going to eat or what we're going to wear or whatever. God the Father will provide for us if we're inside of him. We can't pretend to be, we have to be. So anyway, with that being said, so the disciples pulled Jesus to the side, like, Master, how come we couldn't cast out the devil? How come we couldn't? So these come by fasting and prayer. In other words, you still believe that you are what you think that you are. That's why he called them faithless generation. You still can't believe what you still go by what you see. They was trapped inside themselves. So that's equivalent to me saying it to someone now, and you're hearing this video, but you still can't grasp it. Like, I hear you, but I can't really connect to it because there's something in front of you that's stopping you. There's something that's in front of you. It's a wall, and that wall is called the flesh. This is a wall. The flesh is called the spirit of the Antichrist. The spirit of the Antichrist is a spirit that's in defiance to God, that's in opposition to God. It denies any individual soul. The mission of it is to deny any individual soul to get connection to love. So until that person sees that they are away from love, until then they are in connection to the spirit. When they come to that point where they see that they are away from love, not from a human being, not phileo love. That means brotherly, that means some kind of familiar type love that could possibly be conditional and so forth. That could be incomplete, that don't be whole. That may hit certain areas, but it don't hit all the areas what's necessary. But we're talking about agape love, where this agape love is like they see that no matter amount of money they get, no matter amount of fame they get, no matter amount of attention that they get, they're still incomplete. They're still missing something. Until they get to this place, they won't be in a position to see God's a kind of love, which is agape love, which is perfection. It hits when this love hits you, it covers everything about you. Once this covers everything about you, you talking about this is the spirit of prosperity. You don't have to worry about. The suggestion to worry about a natural matter doesn't even come to you anymore. And even if he was able to get to you, because you may have not grown yet in the knowledge of the truth of God or in the spirit of God yet, that comes in time. As the more that you obey God, it grows. So it's just that the more, and you may not be there on that ground level, so then God will give you something to do or something to say containing towards his will. He told the disciples when they couldn't cast it out, when they asked him how come they couldn't cast out this devil, he said unto them, he said, this comes through fasting and prayer. You have to be separate. In other words, he's saying to them, you're going to have to be separated from the thing that's telling you to disbelieve that you had the power to do it, that you had the authority. They couldn't believe that Jesus gave them that authority. So when they were to do it, that's like God saying the Father saying to us, you will never be without again in your life. We said, okay. But before he said all that, all we have known is that we had to work for it. We had to do all the different things. But if God would appear to you and say, you will never be without again in your life, what do you do with that? Do you seek him for instructions with that? Or do you run with it? If you're seeking him for it, you're not one with it. Because within what he tells you to do, you have the power to do it. So when Jesus gave them authorization to go cast out devils and heal the sick, whatever, they had the authority to do it. The only reason why they couldn't do it is because something was inside of them that disconnected them from what Jesus said to do. That disconnected them from that command. That's what the serpent was trying to do with Adam and Eve in the garden. And now we can see the effects of it going down to Jesus' disciples. So Jesus gave them something to do. These come by fasting and prayer. Why? Because you got to separate from that voice that's telling you what I'm telling you is not the truth. Oh, what I'm telling you is a reality. So you got to separate from the reality, you got to separate from one reality to embrace another reality. The reality that the disciples were in is that everything is not possible. If you try once, it's considered a done deal. And if you try once, you get no results, it's a done deal. But Jesus said, in my reality, that's not the case. It's when you believe, when you're in your right positioning, what you say will happen. Now, this is where we would, through that reality of disbelief, we try to figure out, we try to get enough knowledge to understand what do you mean that when we're in our position? Well, how do we get in our position? Jesus just told you through fasting and prayer. But once the disciples got into their position, though, now we're talking about the book of the day of Pentecost. They was in a position to receive because what they was running from, which is the fear. They was running from and running with. They was running from death, but running with fear. So it put them into a place to be at a position where they was humbled before God, that they saw that they were without him. They needed him. We call those desperation situations, but okay, whatever. They was without them. They was running for their life. So they in the upper room. Now you got to think about this. This is Saul, and a whole bunch of them. They are full out pursuit to end the whole testimony, the witness of Jesus Christ is alive. They out to destroy that. No, this is actually before that. Yeah, no. This is during that time, and but the people that were studying the law was of disbelief. And I won't say it was a disbelief because they were studying the law. No, they had the spirit of the Antichrist, and it was causing them to disbelieve, or to believe in the natural and not to believe what is yet to come. So within that, they had anything that was going up against the natural, they were seeking out to kill, or anything that's not walking in the natural, anything that's not bowing to the rules of the natural, or we would call it a bowing to the rules of the flesh, it was sought out to be killed, because now you're serving another authority, another kingdom. And that kingdom is opposing the kingdom that's actually reigning. And that reign of that kingdom is to put people in what? Fear. So this new kingdom is to liberate them from that fear. So anybody that's represented that is going to have to kill. So the disciples, at the time that Jesus died, whatever, and not rose, but he was on the cross, and whatever, they spread it out. They went their own way. And this is how you get Peter to deny Jesus 3 times. They didn't want no parts of that. They didn't want no parts of it, because it's like it's either you with them or you're against them. If you're at that time, it's not where we are now, where we have the religious freedom to exalt God, but it's coming to a place now. If you see the writing on the wall, it's coming to that place where that religious freedom is being restricted to basically to a certain custom. All right, so where they was at. If you didn't believe what they believed, you were against it. That's why they crucified Jesus. Jesus wasn't for the flesh ruling. He wasn't for the spirit being reconnected back with the Father. That's why he said in 3 days, this temple shall fall. In 3 days, I'll build it up again. He was talking about the temple as himself. They thought the temple was a place of worship. But no, I said, no, y'all made that to a den of thieves. So that can't be a place of worship. So this temple that was worshiping the God, worshiping the Most High. And how was he worshiping God the Most High? In obedience. So in 3 days, they're going to destroy this temple. But in 3 days, it will rise. Right? So they were against what he was saying because he was liberating the people from the flesh nature or the flesh reality to a spiritual reality. So if you're going to have this abundance of life, let's say it this way, if you're going to be separated from a impoverished lifestyle, the impoverished lifestyle is designed for you to labor all the days of your life. It's designed to make you work all the days of your life. But once you become a new creation in Christ, Jesus becomes your Lord. So that makes he give you access to the Father. And then once you get access to the Father, you are a citizen to the kingdom. And once you're a citizen to the kingdom, now the Father becomes your provision. And this is why Jesus was able to say what he was able to say. Have no need for these things. Have no worry about these things. The Father already knows what you're in need of. But you can't see it that way until you are in oneness with him in spirit and soul and mind, or we could say in spirit and soul. You can't see it the way the Father see it until you are one and the same as He see it. So now we're going back to the covenant. When you are inside His Son, you are inside His love. And if a person can't believe that His Son was His love, then how can you get to Him as you are? You're going to have to go through what? Through the commandments. All right, but you don't work for that. That's not spiritual. That's physical. That means you're doing a custom to separate you from the physical nature. So like if you were to fast, if you were to do this, if you were to do that, you are separating yourself from the flesh nature, right? The flesh consciousness, or the voice of the flesh. That's what all those things do, is separate from that. Just to bring you where? To a place to hear from the Father. But Jesus said, if you just take up my cross, or if you take up your cross and follow me, you, instead of doing all those commands, if you were just to love your neighbor, if you were to love your enemies, you would see the Father a whole lot faster than you would if you try to do all the commands. You can't just do one command and you're good. You got to do all 600 commands. That if you're going to go according to the law, you got to do all 600 commands. But if you're going to be up under the grace of God, you're only following 2 commands. Loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and being existent. And once you place the Father number 1, once you place love number 1, that love comes inside of you, and you become a new creation. Now, therefore, you will go and do the second command, which is to take that love and to love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor is not the ones that you like; it's your enemies. It's treat everybody as though that you want to be treated, and that's where it becomes the biggest threat to the flesh, because the flesh wants you to rule as a god. Why? Because the flesh wants to rule as a god. If you don't rule as a god, if it doesn't convince you to rule as a god, how can it rule as a god without you? It can't. That's what keeps the Antichrist spirit alive. It needs our cooperation. But in our cooperation, it puts us in poverty because we become what? Broken. Even though it convinces us to believe that we're whole by getting everything that we want, but it doesn't fulfill everything that we actually lacking. That's like you taking a vacation, but you still got the problem inside your head. So how did the vacation solve anything? So this is what serving the flesh is. It's an entity. It's an identity of his own. It has a voice of his own, and is there to bring forth separation between God and His creation. But Jesus is the great liberator. He's there to bring forth that. He's there to restore that breach, and to bring us back one with the Father. So whenever the Father looks at us, He can see us in the Lamb Book of Life. And in that Lamb Book of Life, it's His desire that you be prosperous. It's not His desire that you go without. And prosperous is not having the biggest house. Prosperous is not having the most fanciest car or all the money. Put it like this. Y'all seen the movies, those hero villain movies? Or you got the crooks and the robbers? Tell me this. When you get the crook or the villain of the movie have accumulated a power of fear throughout the whatever, why do they still go after money? Help me to understand that. If you have a power of influence, why you still go after money? Because money is where the heart is. If you keep the person if you get the person where their heart is, you can go ahead and have rights to their soul, right? So if their heart is towards their money, if you take away their money, that's where their heart would be. You got the possession of their soul, possession of their heart, right? So they will do your bidding. But tell me how this works. Isn't it going backwards though? Because you have the power of influence which is the power of fear. Why do you need money to endorse your reign? You already have the presence. So it's like those hero movies where you got the bad guy who has like this freeze ray gun. Well, he can shoot it and you freeze. Why do they go after money? Because they stuck in the fear. Forgive me. I want to say flesh and fear. They stuck in the flesh bubble or the flesh reality. They can't see past what they see. They think the only way they can actually have power is only through one way. And as long as they in that way, they're gonna be in misery. Now, the children of faith don't walk like that way. That's why prosperity is different from poverty. prosperity works, it has to dwell in a clean temple. Poverty deals with an unclean temple. That's why you see the impoverished. If you were to see an impoverished home on the outside, just talk to the person who owns the home or the person that lives there, and you see poverty within them. You just talk to them. You will hear the deaf come out of their tone. You hear them how they stand on a throne, and that fear is their crown, and death is their scepter. They never say anything that's of life, that's produced, that comes from the prosperity spirit. They would never say anything like that. Everything is always the opposite of that because they hold a deaf spirit. So anybody that can dwell in that atmosphere is one of the same as that atmosphere. Not physically, in their soul. A portion of what's in that atmosphere is inside of them. The problem when a person have a migraine, or problem when a person has like seizure or something like that, is that when they battle in two different worlds, you have been one way in your soul, or you have agreed to be one way in your soul. Just like, for example, you agree to the atmosphere of, you agree to a portion of poverty. So the atmosphere that you stay in is poverty. And you agree to have a part of that poverty inside of your soul, but then you come to some truth. Now you can understand your headaches. It don't matter what age or whatever that you get it at. You're seeing something on the outskirts of that environment, and it's bring forth a disruption. As someone once told me, it's like a good thought facing a bad thought. This is where you get your what would you say it? Your migraines. It's a good thought versus a bad thought. So it's a good suggestion versus a bad suggestion. You're stuck in the middle. Now, if it was only good coming to you, you wouldn't have the migraine. If it was only evil coming for you, you could understand the migraine. You'd be tolerable of the migraine. So in other words, until the poverty spirit is out of you, you're going to be one and the same with that poverty spirit. So in other words, what has to come in? First of all, the poverty spirit has to come out. So something has to be more powerful to kick it out of you. That's where humility kicks in. So once you start humbling yourself, it will open up your eyes to see your atmosphere around you. And now, before the prosperity comes inside of you, that humility will give you something to say or something to do. Because the humility works in the demonstration of what? Love. And as you grow in humility, in other words, as the more that you are obedient to the humility, the more you grow. And now you're growing in the eyesight of God. You know, take a person in the Bible, and a person in the Bible that's considered prosperous. How do you think they got prosperous? That it is what? Got prosperous? But if you were to hear that backstory, they was obedient to God. They was upright. They set themselves apart from the things of the flesh, or they hated to do wrong, or they had a heart for love, or they had a heart for just to give. They had a heart, they had a God's heart. So they was prosperous because of that nature. Or when God find favor in a person, they were separated from what the flesh was doing, right? So if you still got a part of your soul that's in connection to a poverty situation, so like for example, if you live in a poverty situation, a poverty atmosphere, poverty is still inside of you. Otherwise, if it wasn't inside of you, how could you be there? The two have to coexist. A part of you has to be a part of it, or a part of it has to be a part of you for y'all to coexist. And then a person's like, well, this is all I got to take. Once again, it's a part of you. You have not knowing. So like, for example, I got to stay here because this is the very best that I can do. That's poverty. You can't see past yourself. But it doesn't come with actually going to school per se. It's a spiritual, it's a soulish change. Your soul has to get to, you have to get to a place of humility where you cry out to God in a way, or you're asking God, like, not for things or a better life, because a better house doesn't make you a better situation. You can have the better house and still be miserable in it. So what has to change is you. No, there's something inside of you that's void. It's somewhere part of your soul, some part of your mind, your will, your emotion, your intellect, and your imagination is being deprived of love. In other words, in those 5 areas, you're not like a child, innocent. In one of those 5 areas, if not all 5 areas, possibly, maybe so many at once, you can believe that you could be hurt, harm, and danger in one of those areas. So until you are made whole, that you can't be hurt, harm, or danger in part of your soul, you can't see better. You can't. If you can't see better, how can you be in position to hear better? And if you can't hear better, how can you be able to know where to go where betterness is? No, you're gonna work. You're gonna do everything of. You're gonna do everything that the flesh will guide you to do to have a better life, but that better life is deceptive. It's not really. It looks like it's gonna be better, but you still got the misery inside of you, and it knows that because it's not giving you anything how to separate from the flesh. It's giving you anything how to increase or embrace the flesh. And so the more the flesh is embraced, you're going to carry it with you. So no matter if you get a new house, somebody says, I can't stand this neighborhood and everything else. This neighborhood is terrible and everything else is all this gun. It's not, you go get the finest house. You go get the finest neighborhood and everything else, you're still going to be miserable. Because the misery wasn't in the neighborhood. The misery was inside of you. So somebody said, well, no. Well, then why was you in the misery in the first place? Well, that's the reason why I left the misery. No, you're there to change the misery. If you're not misery, you can't help but to change the misery. That's why you're there. You are miserable to show you your errors of your ways. But you will see it that you're not the one that's miserable. You're not the one that's causing the misery. You see that everybody else. That's why wherever you go, it will follow you. You haven't humbled yourself. You still see yourself as a God, like it couldn't be you. Now, I don't see myself as a God. That's what seeing yourself as a God as. That is not, you're not the problem. If you were whole, if you wasn't of misery, how did you land in a miserable situation? You only thought that was the only outcome for you, which is misery. How come you didn't get the new house or the better neighborhood and everything else when you wasn't of misery? Because you wasn't who you think that you were. So you worked hard and got enough money to get yourself in a better situation, but you didn't change you. So what's in you is going to go with you to this new household. So even if you try to do your very best to keep everything different than where you came from, the people that's around you that you have influenced, because you have the what? The scepter of death. And the way that you have brought up people or surround yourself with the very commands that's coming out of you, they will be up under that influence. That's going to be that atmosphere. And if you don't do the damage, they will bring the damage. Or they will recruit somebody to bring in the damage. So this is how you get stuff on the outside to come in. It's still an inside job. So the reconstruction has to start with the person. That person has to humble themselves. And they have to see that they are missing something. They have to see that a part of their soul. First of all, let's break this down first. Let's say you are a tripart being. You are a spirit, you have a soul, and you live in a body. The body gives you the access to walk around on the earth because the earth has an atmosphere. It has a climate control. And so your body is made to adjust to that climate control. If you were a spirit only, you don't need the body. That's why the scripture says to be absent from the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. You will be on a higher plane. Now you're talking about above the earth, right? So if you're in the midst of that, in the midst of your spirit, you have a soul, right? And that soul consists of your mind, your will, your emotion, your intellect, and your imagination, right? Now, can you say your mind, your will, your emotion, your imagination? Let's say it again. Your mind, your will, your emotion, your intellect, your imagination. Can you say all five of those components is filled with unconditional love? That means there's no hurt, no harm. It cannot recall any hurt or any harm that you ever seen, ever witnessed, ever experienced. Can you say that? If you can say that, then your soul is whole. And if that's the case for you, then how did you get inside of a miserable situation other than to birth what's inside of you? In other words, you're there on assignment then, because you have transformed into the image of God. And the image of Christ, I said that way. You have transformed into the image of Christ, which is what? Love. So therefore, you are a dispensary now. And that if you are placed in a miserable situation, and if your soul is whole, then therefore you are there to be a light to everybody else around you. You're on assignment. Otherwise, you're just for you, right? If you're just for you, well, then you're not a citizen of the kingdom. Because the citizens of the kingdoms are ambassadors for Christ. In other words, they're there to infuse love because they are on assignment to infuse love. So if you get a person like, well, I don't know about that. I still got to worry about you in misery. And that's why misery will follow you everywhere you go. So take that person for like that is in misery, and they don't want to be in misery anymore. If you're going to be in misery, you're going to have a impoverished spirit, and you're going to dwell. Excuse me. And you're going to dwell in a impoverished spirit. And I'm sorry, forgive me. You're going to dwell in a miserable atmosphere, and your atmosphere is going to be impoverished. It's going to be based between fear and death. The conversations, the atmosphere, regardless if it's coming through social media, regardless if it's coming through family or just talking or friendships, whatever, or acquaintances, whatever that you're going to get is going to be either two subjects. It's either going to be of fear or it's going to be of death. And in between is you listening to the flesh. That's why you got put in that between a rock and a hard place, because you as a soul was willing to go across the lines of disobedience. And disobedience is to listen to what the flesh is telling you to do versus what the spirit is telling you to do. For you to listen to the spirit, you have to be born again. In other words, you have to be separated from the flesh to be able to listen to the spirit. So how can you get that inside of you on your own? That's why the Father sent us a Savior. But if you can't believe that the Father sent forth the Son as the Savior, how can you have this abundance of life? How can you have the life of prosperity? You're going to work for it. And you could do the law, you could do all the commands and everything else all you want, but you're going to labor for it all the days of your life. But then the Father gave us an easy way. He gave us a very easy way to accept the Son. Accepting the Son is not just accepting Jesus Christ. Accepting the Son is actually allowing your spirit to become one with Him, and you become what? Born again. In other words, you no longer is about you anymore. When you were serving the flesh, it was about you, how you feel, what you want, your needs to be met. It's not about you anymore. And it's not a temporary thing that you're doing for a season. This is who you are. It's not about you. And when you change, it's not about you. When you partially change, you're going to do it for a little bit, and then you're going to go back to your old nature. When you go back to your old, if you try to walk right for a little bit, because it's partially a little bit has been perfected in love, you're gonna go back into the doing, try to save those of the old. They're gonna transfer what's old to you, and you're gonna go back to where you once was. It's a deception. It's a seducing deception spirit. It's gonna keep bringing you back in a vicious cycle. Or you go say, well, I'm gonna stay to myself where nobody can hurt me. Well, then how can you get past yourself? How can you grow in the things of God? Because if you're saying that you're with God, but you're not growing past fear that anything could hurt you, how can you honestly please God, let alone how can your development continue to grow? You can't. You're stuck. Misery. Or if not, you're going to go back to the things where you used to be, which is going to invite more of the seducing spirits and more damnation spirits inside of you, which is going to actually create your pain even the more, which is more misery. So whatever that you have touched will die, and what that you will touch will die. It leaves you between what? A rock and a hard place. Fear and death. With that being said, my people of faith, you are the blessed. Let's be the blessing. Let's keep walking.